everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Team League Talks podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Becker, out of Alexandria, Virginia. On this episode, we have probate attorney extraordinaire Al Nicoletti from Jacksonville, Florida. Welcome, Al. What's up, man?
Andrew, thank you for having me on the podcast, and it's always exciting when we get to share our niche and share what we do every day with the whole community. So ready to dive in, ready to unpack this whole niche for you.
Very cool. Well, let's start slow, Al. So if you can kind of just give a high level, who you are, what you do every day as it pertains to probate and real estate. Just give us a high level overview.
Yeah, my name's Al Nicoletti. I'm a probate real estate attorney in Florida. We go all over the state of Florida helping a lot of investors when they get these deals that are messy and crazy. They involve probate, maybe they involve quiet titles, partitions, guardianships, unlawful detainers, all sorts of those weird things. And we get these things done efficiently. And one thing that's been big with probate is I wait until the closing to get paid. So we don't
That's
need the
awesome.
money. Andrew, it's a massive thing for people, right? Like
Yeah.
sellers don't want to front that. Investors really don't want to front that or don't have the capital, especially if they're getting started.
Yeah.
And so when you're able to have this like unique model where everything's deferred until the closing, it helps everybody, whether it's one probate or five probates in one deal.
And Al, this is a real estate podcast. So real estate agents, investors alike are their typical transaction that they do is like that anyways, right?
Mhm,
But
mhm.
you're involved in when it's not just the property, it's a probate, it's this whole big legal thing, and you're able to defer as well. So that's really cool. Just like licensed real estate agents defer until they close too. Al, for those listening that don't know what probate is, can you give a third grade like probate 101 definition here, and then we can dive deep into like the craziness or the easiness of probate?
Yeah, let's get down to this, right? So at the end of the day, somebody owns a property and it can be a car, it can be a house, it can be a bank account, whatever it is. They own it in their name. When they die, we have to do probate here in Florida. Other states can be different.
Hmm.
But in order to get it out of their name, we got to go through this probate process where us as lawyers, we're preparing all the paperwork, putting the names, putting the property, putting who the beneficiaries are, loading up the documents. Then eventually we get it signed by the heirs, sent back, and we file it in court. And then in court, eventually the judge reviews the file. And when they're satisfied, they sign court orders. Those court orders now effectively transfer the title to who those heirs are. So now those heirs can now sell, convey, do whatever they want. And if you got a closing, now the title company needs those so you can close. So really all probate is this process of distributing the asset and the title to who the heirs are and moving that title over.
But it's also a legal thing that the government oversees in a court, usually a probate court, right? Or a circuit court in whatever county, in whatever state that person or the property is, right? And why is it important that that happens? Why does the government, kind of like the legal part or aspect of this, come into play here?
Well, this is just what the state wants. The state wants there to be a legal oversight to, who are the heirs? Is this done according to statute? Is this done according to how the legislature has prescribed what is necessary? Who's coming next in line? So the judge needs to review the file to make sure, has everybody put this together to make sure you got all the kids ever, or if you have any people that died after that, or
Right.
anything like that. But also, the major issue too is title insurance. Title insurance is really the big thing in all of this for a sale of property. They want to make sure that everything's buttoned up, all the heirs are accounted for because they don't want an issue with the title claim later that
Yeah.
somebody was left out.
A
So a
legal
lot of
claim,
this.
right, Al? Like someone coming in and saying, "Hey, I wasn't given my fair chance, or I was
Sure.
excluded from this," correct?
Yeah, they were excluded from it, or they may say, "Hey, I was an heir, but nobody included me." And so, a lot of this process is laying that record to make sure that everybody that is needed to be included is included.
Right. And a lot of that process, the overarching kind of MO of the process is so everything's done to the legal language of the law in the state where you are. So no one can come back and say, "Hey, this was unfair." And then it's a whole mess that everyone involved has to deal with. So it's almost a way to kind of not control, but like kind of control that process to make sure heirs are represented fairly, creditors are paid, and assets are liquidated, and then ultimately how the estate closes, right? And then
Right.
everyone distributions and all that good stuff, and then no one can come back and raise their hand and say, hey, wait a second, I don't think this was done fairly.
Yeah, it's really just that process of making sure things are done according to the way the statutes say.
Right.
It's that, and then you're accounting for all the assets that need to be included in that probate so that it can effectively transfer the title out of what those people own to those heirs. And then, beyond real estate, if you there's bank accounts, IRAs, Ks, those court orders are needed
Yeah.
because that's the authority that those people have now to go collect that money. So,
Hmm.
if Sally's got a 401k, she died, she has $1 million in it. Well, that 401k company is not going to release the money to the heirs without a court order. So they
Right.
need that court order to prove
Yeah.
though they are entitled to that money.
Yeah, yeah. So everyone listening here who's done a real estate transaction kind of knows how that works. But can you give us like the start to finish when a probate file, petition for probate is filed with the court, kind of all the way through the steps that you see that one would go through in probate? And this example will happen to include a property inside of it. Can you walk everyone through like what that looks like?
So just a typical kind of file that we get, right? So anytime we get a file, what happens is an investor or realtor says, "Hey, the client I'm talking to, her mom died, her dad died, the brother died, and they own this property." And I'll say, "Okay." So my first thing I would tell people I would say is, "Hey, there's a checklist of items of things that we are going to need so we can evaluate if we can do this. So here's the checklist. Checklist has death certificate, title commitment, contract, deed, will if there is one. And we'll say, hey, they got to get us all these things, work with the title company, and then let's go. They'll get it, they'll send it to us, and then eventually we'll have a consultation and a meeting. And during that meeting, that's when we break everything down. Who are you? Who is this in relation to you? Did they have a will? Was there a surviving spouse? Okay, no. How many children ever? And we're really doing a deep dive on the family tree. And then from there, we're kind of figuring out like what's the real story look like? Because sometimes what happens, Andrew, is and it's not really, the family doesn't just know, but sometimes the family will think it's just them. And then when we do the breakdown, I'm like, well, there's 10 kids here.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not just you. You got 10 more people that you got to deal with.
Yeah.
So at that point, what happens is we got to work through like what happens next, right? My model is waiting until closing to get paid. That means that everybody's on the same page and willing to do this. Sometimes that at that point, the investor's got to go back and get everybody under contract, and work on maybe finding out who the heirs are, where they are, how can they locate them.
Right.
Assuming they get all 10, now we get all the documents together, we draft everything, we prepare everything, we put all the petitions together, and then we send it to the heirs. Some need to get notarized, some need to get DocuSign, eventually get sent back. And then that's our process of then taking that paperwork, putting it through the court system, getting everything submitted, and then eventually getting those court orders submitted to the judge. And then once we have those court orders, then we say, hey, everybody, we got the court orders. Who's the title company? Who's on the transaction? Let's send everything to everybody. And so we'll send it there. And that's really our process. Like we're over the years, my team, and every year we regroup, we reset. My team's got a really solid process to what we do. And when I first started this, I mean, I'm sure like just like you probably with real estate, it's like you're just trying to do whatever, however it gets done, whatever we need to do to get that in, right? But after a while, you need to smooth out your process. So we have a very smoothed out process, and we're very high at volume with these deals. So we're
Yeah.
pumping these out all the time. And for timeline purposes, these probates can take a matter of like 4 to 8 weeks.
Hmm.
So we're not talking, 6 months, 12 months, 2 years. We're talking a matter of like weeks.
Yeah.
So these things can be fast.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned earlier when a real estate investor or real estate agent comes to you and says, hey, Al and team, we have this property, it's in probate. And you mentioned a list, but you kind of went through it quickly. But if anyone out there has a probate lead, what are the can you walk through each one or just say it again where it's like in a perfect environment of, I'm assuming not everyone brings everything right away. But in a perfect environment, like, what are the common docs that any attorney, not just you, but any attorney that's handling a probate case would need from that person or the family?
Yeah, so what we developed, Andrew, so when I first started doing this, we were doing basically I was doing blind consults. So I was having phone calls with the heirs and basically just trying to piece everything together in the
Yeah,
moment and like, hey, can you, while we're on the phone, can you send the death certificate? Can you like send all this? It was too chaotic.
yeah.
And eventually my team was like, we're not doing this anymore. So I was like, okay,
Good
we're going
idea.
to change this. And so eventually we created this checklist, this probate checklist. And what we did was we said, and you would laugh at this, but when I first made it, because they were done with me doing the blind stuff, when we first made it was like 17 items. I was like, get this, get this, get this. And then we realized, well, that's probably too much. How can we narrow this down to make this really easy, simple, so the heirs can get us just what we need so that we get it over to me so I could say, hey, here's what we're dealing with. Here's how we do it. And we finally got in this rhythm of, yep, make the file, make the file, make the file. So here are a couple things. Number one, you got to get all of the heir info, their full names, their legal addresses, maybe mailing addresses, their email addresses.
What's your definition of an heir?
An heir is whoever is rightfully entitled to that estate, depending on whatever line they come down. If there's a will and they're in the will, they could be the heir, or an heir is somebody that is in that pecking order that is just entitled to that asset.
Is it normally like 99% of the time family members?
Oh
Unless it's
yeah,
a non-family member, it's stated in a will.
yeah, it's usually
Yeah,
a spouse or
yeah,
kids
yeah.
or maybe grandkids or whoever comes next in that line, right? There's a certain family tree line. So yeah, family members are going to be the ones, and but sometimes it's not. Maybe there's a will and it leaves it to a fiance or
Yeah.
it leaves it to a family friend. So that could be a
Okay.
beneficiary depending on what's going on.
Cool. So number one, Al, is who are all the people that could potentially have a right to claim the rights to the estate?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you have all the people that are going to be getting or inheriting the asset, right? So those people, you want to get all of their info. You want to collect all of that. So you got names, mailing address, emails, right? Or phone numbers just in case the title company needs it. Death certificate. This is a big one too, Andrew. So when you get probate deals, what happens on the title side of things is the underwriter needs to clean up the title end of people that were in the chain. And so if you have husband and wife on the title and they were married at the time of death, husband dies, then wife dies, I'm telling you, hey, we need to do a probate for the wife. But title insurance sees it as a couple other things. They want the death certificate of the wife and the husband. So when you're collecting these documents, you want to try to get the right things that also the title company needs for because that'll delay things later if you don't get it up front.
Yeah, that's why it's so important up front to get all your ducks in an order. So you're removing all the hurdles by having this amazing checklist to be like, hey, here are the 5 things.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you're getting all you're trying to be efficient and proactive up front.
Right.
That'll save everybody time later because
Yes.
the more things that they have up front, the better your process will be, the better the attorney's process will be.
Yeah.
And title too. You want
Right.
to make sure title's good.
Okay, cool.
So
So list of heirs certificate. If it's a spouse, you have to get both. If
yeah,
there is another spouse involved, it's better to get both or to have both for the title part. So what's next?
any will. So many people don't have a will, but some of them do have a will. So you really want to find out, hey, did that person that died have a will? Where's the original ink will? We got to find out where that is. And sometimes they had a will leaving it to a trust. And so you want to ask a couple of these questions when you get there because the lawyer is going to ask them anyway. Another one's the real estate contract because you got to make sure everybody's on the same page. The deed, a copy of the deed. So if you got to get really used to your property appraisers or your county records, however you're able to pull those last sales that are on the property and be able to help pull that from the county record. I think the biggest one and my favorite one from all of this really is the title commitment. That's the document that when you go under contract with the seller and you have seller buyer, and then you bring the contract over to the title company and open up escrow, they're eventually going to prescribe this report called a title commitment. And on the commitment, it's going to list exactly what the underwriter that's needing to get this thing closed is calling for. They're going to list everything. They're going to say, is probate even needed? How many probates? Are there any phantom mortgages? Are there any liens? Are there anything that you didn't even know about? That's the moment that you got the car and now you're finally like lifting the hood and now you're
Yeah.
seeing what's
Okay.
really inside.
Al, you just said something that is super interesting to me, and I'm hoping you can. I'd love for you to explain it. But typically, when someone passes away, they open up probate. But you just said there could be multiple probates. Why would that happen? What scenario? Can you explain that?
So it depends on the way that the tree flows, right? So let's just say you start, but here's a classic scenario. You have somebody that died, John dies, and when John died, he had no will, no surviving spouse, and he had two kids ever. So we find out, okay, so where are the kids? And then we find out, well, one's alive, and then the other kid died after John. And so when you have somebody that dies after that title owner, that kicks in the second probate.
Interesting.
So let's
Okay. Cool. Yeah.
so let's get deeper. You
Yeah.
find out the child dies after John. The child had no will, a surviving spouse, and no kids ever. Then you find out that the spouse of child one died after. That kicks in probate number 3. So the deeper we go with these post deceased people, the
Right.
more that the tree spreads and the more now we got to figure out what's going on. And it's a little different with pre-deceased. The pre-deceased, you don't need another probate, depends, but we have to walk through this. So that's why when people are like, wait, why does this need like 6 probates? It's like, well, first of all, they've waited a long time to get this thing rolling because there's that many people that had died after that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But
Potentially. Right. Yeah.
potentially. And then the crazy part too, Andrew, and we could go down rabbit holes, but the crazy part too is sometimes I get on these calls and I walk them through everything, and sometimes the heirs are like, oh, I think we're gonna wait a while. And I'm like, the longer you wait, the more you risk that there's gonna be more probates later. It's gonna be even
Yeah.
messier.
Right.
So
That's crazy. Yeah, thanks for explaining that to us. So, okay, jump back into like the checklist. Is that it, or is there anything else? And can you give a quick recap of like the 4 that you've mentioned, or is there anything else that you would want to see as an attorney?
really, I think it's just the heir info, the deed, the death certificate, the title commitment, the real estate contract, and is there a will and or trust involved? I think those are the basic ones that people should really know about, and they could
That's
work
like the
with.
starter pack, at least.
That's
At
the
the very
starter pack
least,
for
the
sure.
starter pack that will get the ball rolling for someone like with the expertise that you have to kind of dig in and say, okay, what's really happening here?
Yeah, that's definitely some of the basic things that you're going to need up front. And then, of course, depending on what state you're in and where you're at, maybe the attorney there is going to have a little bit different of a nuance that they want for their items.
Right.
I tell people it's really important that you really connect with someone solid in your state that knows that probate law, that's not just dabbling in it, but does it every single day. Like I do it every single day. I'm deep in this niche.
Yeah. Yeah, you were gracious enough to give your time to my teach that probate course, of course, and you came on and you gave us absolute fire yesterday. People were so ecstatic, and that was a very big eye opener. It's kind of the same thing. Like if you think about it, if you're doing 95% of your day is probate, day in, day out, you're going to start to see weird things that you know how to eventually solve. Over time, it's going to be like easy peasy for you, right? Like, oh, I've been here, know exactly what to do. The same concept or principle is true for like a real estate agent who's working a development property or a certain like a commercial, like there's a specialist that you need. So for those of you working probates or want to work probates, that is probably one of the most important aspects of this whole thing. Getting an attorney that has almost a decade experience like you do, Al, of just this is the only thing that I do, not 3% of our business, and then it's going to delay. So how important is that, and how cool is it for you to be able to say, hey, I've pretty much seen everything there is to see, right? I'm sure there's some pretty crazy stuff that you've seen, but how awesome is it to have someone like you on the team for those using you in Florida?
Oh, it's a huge resource, right? Because there's a lot of people that will come to me because I've seen so much.
Right.
I've completed over 2,000 probates.
Wow.
I mean, so many, and we're on pace for 500 at the end of the year. So we've seen so many different scenarios. I haven't seen everything. The fun part in what we do is we see also a lot of hypotheticals, and
Yeah.
that's the good part too, because the hypotheticals are the what if that ever does come down the pipe? How do we handle that? How would we do that?
Right.
And, so yeah, we've seen so many different kinds. How do we get around this? How do we figure this out? And it's always exciting. You get the easy ones. The easy ones, great. But then you get the harder ones, and then it's like, well, how do we tackle this? How do we get around this? How do we figure this out? And that's my game every day. Like, that's really the probate and curative world that we're in. We're trying to cure that title so that we can get that deal to the closing team.
Yeah, in its most efficient, economical way possible. Yeah. Same thing again, like people hire real estate agents to remove hurdles before they even know they exist so they can sell their homes in the most efficient manner for the most amount of money. You come in and do that part if there's real property inside of an estate for the probate part. Dude, I can't imagine, like, do you have any nightmare stories of people trying to navigate this without a probate attorney or without like professional help? Like what you told us yesterday was like mind blown. There's so much involved in this. I can't even imagine a PR or personal representative, the one like responsible for seeing this through to try to navigate this alone. Do you have any like stories that you can share with maybe one of like someone that tried to do it on their own and then was like, okay, I give up. Let me hire Al to come in and save the day.
Yeah, I haven't really seen anybody do it on their own, but what I have seen is like they've gotten with the wrong attorney.
Yeah.
And then the attorney drags it out for 2 years or doesn't respond to anybody, or they
Yeah.
can't get a hold of anyone. Like we saw one like 2 years ago. I mean, just as just an example, where the probate was going on for 2 years, and they came to me and they're like, "Hey, we're ready to switch." And I was like, "All right, you may want to give them one more shot and try to go to." And they did. They tried to get in touch with them, didn't respond. Law firm like wouldn't get back to them. And so sometimes what happens is just the sellers have just gotten with the wrong people to begin with, and then we're kind of fixing up the issues if they want to do something about it. But yeah, I just would say like there's so many things to know about this niche. There's so many nuances, and there's people I work with on the daily that still you would think, you got it down, but they still
Yeah.
ask the questions, and I'm like, I know. I was right there with you, but like that's why it takes a specialist to be in every day. You want somebody that's like grinding in this, because I'm always working through in my mind like what the best strategies are. And kind of like if you got a deal and you're like, should we wholesale it? Should we fix and flip it? Should we do a novation? Same idea, right? Like in my mind, I'm thinking, well, how can we what's the way that we get through this? Should we do this? Should we do that? And so you need somebody that's going to do that. And fortunately, the best part for people that have always come to our law firm is we're here to provide that creative solution, that creative mindset so we can get it done.
Yeah. Yeah. And guys, the difference between working with an Al Nicoletti attorney who knows his stuff and is in this stuff day in and day out is if it, let alone taking 2 years to close. So the time aspect of it, but the heirs, the PR, they're also potentially paying a mortgage or they're paying taxes or they're paying utilities or they're not able to pay creditors that are legally, allowed to start coming after an estate for money owed, right? So this
Mhm.
is super important if you're working in probate to attach to someone like an Al that can close this in 2 to 4 weeks instead of 24 months. It's crazy that some probates do take that long, but it matters who you work with, right? Just like the real estate agent, it
Mhm.
matters who can get
Mhm.
them the most money in the shortest amount of time and make it a smooth closing. So fantastic information, man. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for being on, Al. If
Yeah.
anyone is in the state of Florida listening and is an investor or a real estate agent and they do want to connect with you, because I highly, highly recommend that they do, especially if they've had a year or two probate before, how does somebody get in touch with Al Nicoletti?
Well, Andrew, first of all, thank you so much for having me on the podcast and being able to dive into this. I mean, I'm sure you can imagine There's so many rabbit holes. There's so many. I mean, this is just the very, very tip of the iceberg. So thank you for having me on the podcast.
Yeah.
Best way for everybody to get in touch is you can, of course, call us. It's 904-900-53. If you call, leave a voicemail so we get that. And then you can email us. It's al@alnicoletti.com. Find me on Instagram, YouTube. I have a whole YouTube channel. I'm on Facebook. And of course, I have my show, my podcast called The Al Nicoletti Show, where I bring on all these real estate investors and wholesalers and everybody. And Andrew, we're going to have Andrew on the show for sure. I got him on that list for next season. So
yeah, dude.
But we have people there. So find me on everything, Spotify, iTunes. You can't miss it.
Very cool. Well, Al, thank you so much for presenting to my class yesterday. It was phenomenal feedback. Everyone loved you. I'm really excited that I was introduced to someone who introduced me to you. And now I have, that expert in the probate space, which is great. So I'm grateful for your friendship. I'm looking forward to doing your podcast too. After we hop off, let's schedule it and get it done.
Yeah, sounds awesome, Andrew. Let's do it.
All right, man. Take care.
Take care.